Okay, I won't swear then.
Hello, Hawkeye fans, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. It is Thursday, October the 13th, 9:15 a.m. Central. If you're watching us on YouTube, I am the guy on your right looking at the screen, and Scott Dochterman from The Athletic is on the left. We do this weekly, and if you are in the chat room, please be nice to each other and don't be foul, or we will excommunicate you from the chat room. So let me flip this on here. Okay, we're good to go. Plenty to talk about today with Hawkeye football. I think the best way to start today. How are you, by the way? You've been on the road a lot. You were in Illinois. Then Monday went to Minneapolis for Big Ten Basketball Media Day. Then came back yesterday for coordinators. You going to rest the next few days?
That's my goal, man. I'm glad we don't have a game Saturday. It's just maybe get some quality lying around time. I got two more stories to write this week. One for tomorrow and another one for, I'll think about whether I need to do the one for Monday on Friday or on Sunday. Because I kind of go back and forth, on Sundays, I get kind of antsy anyway. So I'm like, I'll work ahead. So, but my Bears play tonight. They're going to look like the Fighting Illini with all orange, and that'll be interesting to watch. But yeah,
and it'll look like it'll with the Commanders. It'll probably look like the Iowa-Illinois game in terms of points.
I've made that joke, and sometimes I'm joking, and sometimes I'm really serious. That it's like watching the same game twice every weekend. And there was one week where sometimes I leave the house just to write in a public spot. I don't know, like I'll go to a coffee shop or Hy-Vee in Coralville, I guess Coralville/North Liberty has kind of like this eating area and Wi-Fi, which didn't really work yesterday, so I had to leave. But and it was the Giants Bears game, and I'm kind of watching up, and I'm like, God, they kicked 4 field goals, and I'm like, man, this is the same game. So yeah, hopefully they score at least a touchdown just to even it out and change the dynamic of my football watching these days. And and then last week you throw that game, the Indianapolis Colts Broncos game, which was 12-9 in overtime, all field goals, and then Iowa Illinois, which was 9-6, all field goals. It's like, the football gods hate me this year.
Even that game last night was Marshall and Louisiana was a struggle for a long time too. Offenses are struggling this year on the whole, unless you're, Ohio State, Michigan, schools that pile up a bunch of points. But we will some good games on the schedule this week for us laying around and not having a game for ourselves. Really looking forward to seeing Penn State at Michigan and some others we'll talk about at the end of the show when we do our picks against the spread. But let's start, Scott, back on Saturday. Both of you and I were in Champaign for the pain of watching that game for 3+ hours. And then the post game, which certainly was eventful as well. From Spencer Petras coming in with what appeared to be red eyes to Kirk Ferentz referring back to his body of work from last year. We're at the point now, Scott, where anything that's said, and I'm not excusing anything that was said. I thought Kirk could have handled himself better on Saturday. I thought Brian could have handled himself better yesterday. Kirk's was more in the heat of the moment. Brian's was more of, I think, just kind of who he is. And we'll go over these things individually. But we talked about it last week. With each loss, there's more tension, there's more vitriol. It's just tougher to be in the Iowa football circle. Fan, player, coach, media, everybody right now is kind of on edge.
Yeah, and it really sucks, I think, for everybody involved. And I think this is something that's not new. This isn't something that just came up because, oh my God, what happened with South Dakota State? And it's just got worse. It's something that happened kind of late last season. You know, the loss to Michigan, the loss to Kentucky, the off season that wasn't, if you will, that Iowa had clear problems after last year. We all know it, and the numbers display it. You know, rushing, passing, points, total offense, all of it was atrocious last year. There now that there is a transfer portal, that removes that barrier, that crutch in some ways that people could say of, well, we're just going to have to keep playing who we got. You know, we can't really go out. It's not free agency. No, it is. Now it is. And, you know, yeah, they did look at some free agents, some quarterbacks. They didn't get one. And they did look at linemen and offered linemen. They didn't get one. They looked at receivers, brought one on campus. He decided to go to Bowling Green. He's from Boston College. He decided to go to Bowling Green instead of Iowa. They got a backup tight end who has had very few snaps and hasn't really had any impact at all. And from Lafayette, that's it. For an offense that was broken last year is now shattered this year. And so to top it all off, Iowa doubled down on Bryant as the quarterback's coach. And that was after whatever happened with Ken O'Keefe. He's still getting his salary, so I don't consider it necessarily a retirement. That they doubled down on everything, and it's way, way, way worse than it was last year. And so the tension was already building with the fans. Anytime in the summer, we would write a story about the offense or about Brian Ferentz or about Spencer Petras, people would already start commenting on the negative or the snarky side. So now we've built that up to where they were really operating at a deficit with the fan base, which still sold out the season. And then to put this product on to where they average 14.7 points per game. It's really a tough spot, and makes it even worse when you have an elite level defense that's allowed 10 points or less in 5 of the 6 games, and they've lost 2 of those games. So we've reached a point of, we've seen discontent before, we've seen anger, we've seen vitriol. Yes, social media is more prominent now than it ever was before, but I've never seen this base as angry and pissed off as it is right now.
And I thought about it, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. I almost think that winning the 10 games last year maybe made the urgency for Kirk. And I wrote this on Monday. I think I wrote a column. A bunch of people did. And we've talked about it on the podcast. This is not an original thought. This is Kirk. This is his offense. This is his philosophy. This is his approach. And we get that. And we've talked about that. But I wonder last year if he just felt like, because he said it during the offseason, we're close.
Yeah.
But what is that? I mean, tangibly, what is close? And how do you get from close to over that line? And when you win 10 games and when you win the division and you go to the championship and you go to a really good New Year's Day bowl, what is the urgency to make those changes? Do you feel like, hey, we've done this before, we fixed things before, we're just going to fix things, even though, as you laid out, Scott, the landscape is different now. A lot of the teams in the Big Ten supplemented their rosters through the transfer portal. Iowa did not. John Budmeyer came in and he makes whatever, $100K a year, somewhere around there. And Brian is the quarterback's coach, but there really wasn't a lot. You took a guy in Ken O'Keefe out who's as experienced as probably you can get, and added another guy in who didn't have familiarity with the program. And you think, okay, well, maybe he brings a fresh look at things, but there's nothing fresh about this. And we can go execution, personnel, bad offensive line, lack of receivers, all that stuff. But it still all comes back to the guy in charge and his decision making on how to fix this thing. And they didn't fix it in the offseason. It's going to be really hard to fix it in the season. And will they fix it after the season? Those are kind of the questions in my mind.
In some ways, this is an I told you so moment, not for me, but for everybody, because everybody saw this. Everybody saw, maybe not to this degree, but everybody saw this offense was going to be very challenged to do even what it did last year. What they were banking on was, okay, Spencer Petras is going to be a senior. If nothing else, all the trains are going to run on time. And I think really over the last 4 games, the first 2 was a different world, but over the last 4, he's done that somewhat effectively. Not great, but well enough to where he's not necessarily the problem. He's just not elevating the team, which you'd hope with a senior quarterback as a 3-year starter, he'd do that, but that's not really the case. The receiver problem was a combination of horrific luck and their own making. Going back again, everybody knew Tyrone Tracy was going to leave. Losing Desmond Hudson to UNI, Quavon Matthews, and Calvin Lockett a little before that. Okay, well, those 4, but then you're thinking, well, you still got your 4 top ones returning. Well, then Charlie Jones leaves. That changes the dynamic entirely. And then all the injuries in camp, and they're still digging out of that hole. But to me, the single biggest disappointment and the most difficult part of this for Iowa, no question at all, number 1, offensive line. I expected the offensive line to make some significant strides. Never said that they would be good. I thought that they would be at worst adequate, and if not decent. And they're way below average. And, that to me is, when you look even at bad teams, that some of them can block. And Iowa can't block. Iowa, runs for 2.9 yards per carry on first down, which is the worst in the Power 5. You can't do that.
How many sacks on Saturday? 5?
They had 5. They have 18 through 6 games. That to me is an indictment of, Kirk and Brian are experts. Kirk is a guru. One of the greats of all time, if you want to call it that. Brian, to me, I think is an outstanding offensive line coach. George Barnett has been here 2 years, and do they not have anything to work with, or have they just not done anything worthwhile with that unit? And to me, I think if they even had an offensive line that could take care of business, just have a stalemate, they could run the ball a little bit more effectively, because I think they got good running backs, and they could have enough time for Petras to throw some of those timing routes, which especially inside, which I think he's pretty good at. But not having the offensive line at even a average or below average level, to me, has been the worst part of this whole season.
And here's kind of my question with that, Scott, and what I wonder, and I'm not sure there's an easy answer to this. You talked about the knowledge about the offensive line that this coaching staff has, and I completely agree with you. They had spring ball, camp, beginning of the season. They had to know that this probably was going to be a deficiency. At least I hope so. Did they overestimate how much these guys were going to develop? They had to have seen through the spring and the summer that this was going to be a problem. How do you adjust to not having a solid offensive line? You can't just continue to do what you've been doing in the past when you have a good offensive line, when the offensive line is leaky. So it's up to you to come up with ways to compensate for that. And they haven't done that. They're still trying to do the same things they would do if they had a really good offensive line. To me, that is the biggest issue. Why the lack of adjustment?
You're right. And to me, that's more the coaching staff's indictment as well. Because when you look at their primary plays running the football, It's still inside zone, it's still inside counter, and it's still outside zone, outside slant, whatever. Very rarely are they doing anything outside of that deviation. You're not seeing a pitch, a sweep, something to get some people one-on-one on the outside with some space. There's none of that. And to me, that's something you've got to do if you're not being able to do this in an attack. Last year that might have been the way to get Tyler Goodson more, reps, because he's terrific in space. Wasn't as good when there was no space, which most running backs aren't. That is a big problem. And that's something that they haven't really adequately adjusted, because they really don't do any jet sweeps anymore. And the only semi sort of play that they did was a complete disaster the other day, that flip in the backfield in the red zone. And if I wrote about this today, that if you want to look at one problem of the offense that is significant, it's red zone efficiency. They are awful, just awful. And last week, when you look at 4 times the defense this season has gave them the ball inside the opponent's 35-yard line, twice against Iowa State and twice against Illinois. And the Iowa State ones was twice with blocked punts inside the 20. Only 1 touchdown and 1 fumble. The other day, Jack Campbell's midair recovery of a muff punt, and Riley Moss's big hit that forced him to the 5. They came away with 1 field goal out of that. They couldn't even get a first down to get themselves in field goal range the first time. And then the second time, they ended up at the 23, and then a penalty and a 9-yard pass, and then they had to kick a field goal. That's coaching, man. That's coaching. That's putting your team in the best position to win. When you're at first and goal at the 5, figure out how to get there. And throwing a swing pass to the left where you got your guy open, but your quarterback has been able to hit that throw because he just can't move his body that way. That's the way he's built. And you've known that too, because he just kind of built awkwardly. Throwing them to the left, he can't do it. There's a guy in his face, so what? Loft it. He's got a touchdown. Walk-in touchdown. Okay, the scheme is sound, but scheming for your players is not. Then second down, you did exactly what you always do, which is run the ball, and that was -3. And then you had a personal foul on top of it. It's just everything compounding. And that starts at the top, man. Just like you said, that's Kirk. Kirk's the one who decided all of this. Brian's the one who calls it all. And then the players aren't executing. So it's all 3 their problem. But 2 people are getting paid out of that, and it's not the players.
Yeah, and the players change. It's college football. Guys come and go, but we're seeing a similar problem throughout the years. And that's not to say there haven't been. I mean, by the end of 2020, I thought the offense looked really good, but they were doing different things. They were running jet sweeps. 2019, they were running jet sweeps. There was Wildcat incorporated. The Minnesota game in 2019, they ran some pitch plays to Goodson. It's almost like they decided to stop being innovative at all or creative at all. And I think it comes back to, Scott, not putting – you have to be able to analyze your roster, which, again, turns over all the time, and figure out – I mean, Arlen Bruce isn't getting the football anymore. Find a way to get him the football. Find a way to get Caleb Johnson and LaShawn Williams the ball in space. And again, it comes down to the offensive line, and you're going to have to do some different things, and you may have to take some risks, but what you're doing isn't working. So why not take some risks?
Well, question. You look at, a couple of the plays that, and I don't want to ever look back with fondness for the Greg Davis error, because to me, that's the Todd Licklider situation.
It is. But in fairness to Greg Davis, I don't know if he was told what he was getting himself into either.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, let's see what vanilla ice cream and walnuts make, and it just doesn't work, But one of the things that he did a lot was the quick screen, and this would be right off the line of scrimmage. Bether did it so well, usually to Matt Vandenberg. Why can't Petrus do that to Nico Reganey? And you're out there 2x2 or 2 receivers. and you have him offset, all of a sudden, one step, boom. And he's quick enough that he can, and you got enough space to where maybe he can pick up 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 yards. That to me is something. As you mentioned with jet sweeps. Now, there's no Amir Smith-Marset here.
No.
But
or Tyrone Tracy even.
Yeah, and maybe Arlen Bruce is Tyrone Tracy.
He could be.
And last year I thought Tyrone Tracy deserved the ball more that way because he's a Swiss Army knife. He's not a traditional receiver. And instead of what typically happened was he wasn't getting it done at the X, which is true. He was not getting it done. However, okay, well, what can he do? And let's try to work towards that. This risk system is so rigid. It's like, no, we want to play this way all the time. And it just doesn't always work that way.
And really, isn't that like, I'm glad you brought that up, Scott. You have Reganey and Tracy. Those are two of your better receivers last year. They both are probably more slot guys, but find ways so you don't have that big guy on the outside. You have to adjust to that, right?
Right. Exactly. You can't pine for what you once had. You got to figure it out. And you know what? If, hey, it's just not going to work, then double down on something else. Whether it's, we're going to go 3 tight ends and we're going to blow your ass off the line of scrimmage on every single play. And we're going to play this way because that's the only way we can do anything. Okay, fine. May not agree with you, may not work, but we're going to still continue to do it this way. And we're still going to do 12 personnel on 1st and 10 and run, and it's going to be a 1-yard gain. Then everybody knows it's going to pass. So then we're going to go to 11 personnel and we're going to do this. And then it's going to be incomplete and we're 3rd and 9. That's why they aren't that's why they're not doing anything. You've got to you got to adjust, and there's just no counter to this offense at all. And I wrote that this is why they need to change it. It's broken. It's not coming back. It's not 2002. You've got to, you're talking about cut blocks. They've changed the rules. You've got to change and adapt. Now, there are other factors and that they got hurt on. One is, 2018 and 19 offensive line. They recruited 7 offensive linemen that 2-year period. None of them are starting for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Cody Ince, bad luck. Justin Britt, bad luck. Jack Plum, they think he's not good enough. If he was good enough, he would be a starting right tackle, and Connor Colby might be a guard, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And Jack Plum had the potential to be a good story, but they chose not to do that. You have Noah Fensky and you have Tyler Endries and other ones who just didn't pan out. Well, that's on them. That's what happens. And so now you're relying on really young players, but yes, they have made strides, but not the strides you need. And therefore, and when you don't go to the transfer portal to supplement it, which is what you can do now, we prefer to build our team. Well, so does everybody else, but they're not, Purdue's not afraid to go out and get 10 guys or 5 guys and say, this is how we're going to play and we're going to win. Minnesota, same deal. If they beat you, you've got to adjust your outlook and change your standards or change your attitude, or you're going to get ran over, and it's going to be a really rough time for Iowa. And as we know, last year is well forgotten. It's well in the rearview mirror. You can't live on last year when you're recruiting because it's all about the here and now.
Yeah, and recruiting is another whole animal that we'll talk about at some point when we get closer towards signing day, and kind of we'll have a chance to see how this season maybe impacts recruiting moving forward, because every season impacts recruiting moving forward. It's kind of as Scott said, what have you done for me lately? And they recruited an offensive lineman. Was he out of Harvard that ended up going to Penn State?
I think it was Yale. If I recall.
Yale. I knew it was an Ivy League school, and he visited here and then ended up choosing Penn State.
Hunter Norzad.
That's right. Yep. And he would have been, he's the type of inside guy that they could really use right now.
Right. He would be, okay, throw him in there at right guard or left guard, one of the two.
Look what Michigan did.
Yeah. Exactly. They went after the Virginia kid, and Iowa talked to him a little bit, but they still weren't 100% sure about Linderbaum. Now, I would say that is being incredibly naive if you think that Linderbaum, is not coming back. But I'd say, hey, he's gone. And then if he decides not to, then bring him. But still, Michigan's a great offensive line, and he really fortified it for him. I think it's naive in this day and age not to use every tool to make your team better, and whether it's on offense or defense, special teams, whatever. And the offense right now is at such a deficit that even a second string Missouri Valley guy, a wide receiver, could have come in and helped the first two games, and they chose not to run that path. And when Charlie Jones was exiting, and they still had issues with Keegan Johnson at that point, I mean, you need to look at it and go, okay, we need to do something here quick. Just get a body in here. Instead, nope, we're gonna go with what we got. And right now, when you look at the recruiting landscape, especially at that position, you've got to be concerned that you might not be able to get anybody who can help you right away there either.
Yeah, they had Jake Bostic in the 22 class. Alex Moda from Marion is in the 23 class. So those are really your only two additions, at least to this point, in these last two recruiting classes. What can they add in 23? Are they going to go in the transfer portal? Junior college, what have you? I mean, you think about, getting Nick Easley. There are so many different paths. It just seemed to me, I think when Charlie Jones, it was kind of stunning for everybody when he left, but Iowa should have been alarmed and said, oh shit, we got to do something here. And, what can we do here to fix this and add to this? Because I think, Scott, you have to plan for worst case scenario. And worst case scenario was Nico got hurt. Keegan Johnson hasn't come back. Who am I missing? Any other? Brody Brecht was hurt. I mean,
Deontay Vines, Jacob Bostic.
Yeah, you have to plan for that. You can't say, well, we're going to be fine.
Right. They weren't far from fine. There was no fine at all in there, because Arlen Bruce, who I think is a very good player, he's a non-traditional receiver in body, yes. and what you need is for him to be a complementary piece. That's where he's most effective, and that's probably more as a slot to me, and maybe as a Z, maybe a flanker. But even then, when he's your scholarship guy, it's pretty easy to negate what he can do unless you keep putting him in motion, which they won't do, or they'll put him in motion, but they won't give him the ball. And here we are.
That's the same thing as last year, isn't it?
Yeah.
You had Tyrone and Nico,
mm-hmm.
and they couldn't coexist, and you couldn't find a way to utilize those two guys at the same time. Arlen's having a good beginning of this season. Nico comes back. Now Arlen Bruce has disappeared because you can't find a way to utilize both of them. Yeah, because they're both slot guys.
Right. And it's such a rigid system and way to think on offense that's this way and no other ways about it. We're not, even yesterday, Brian doubled down and called it backyard football with a quarterback who could run. I'm like, everybody else in the country does this except you, maybe Wisconsin. Everybody. You're thinking with an NFL thought, and
did you not see JJ McCarthy make a play and kill you with that touchdown because of his legs? And I know that's an extreme example because Michigan has a ton of really great players, but you can just see what a mobile quarterback can do for you.
They should have known it with Beathard. In the 2015 season, he ran for 34 first downs. That's not all on quarterback sneak. We've seen some of his plays. Yes, he took it at Indiana and spun in the air, but also against Minnesota and the runs that he made, even like against Pittsburgh.
Iowa State.
Yeah. I mean, or out of the end zone and another run. And the Pittsburgh one where he took off on a draw and hit the ground with 2 seconds left to call timeout so they could kick a 57-yard field goal to win. And I'm not suggesting that, okay, well, maybe they felt Nate Stanley was a guy. And I think you look at Nate's statistics now, and there should be nothing but admiration for what he did. I mean, 47 red zone touchdowns to 1 interception in the red zone. They're going to go about 5. It's going to take about 5 years before they hit 47 touchdown passes, period. So, but they put themselves in this box. They won't get out of it. And it's probably going to take a horrific year. And then they'll just say, well, it's personnel based, that they just can't run our scheme. And that's not it. And that, I think that's what the frustrating part is. And then you look on the other side of the ball, the cash system. That was implemented in 2018. They got tired of getting beat by slot receivers. So what do? They moved to defensive back, play the cash, and they've been better than ever. They have been awesome since that time. And their first two cash guys were more safeties, and Amani Hooker and Dane Belton, and they're both in the NFL making impact plays. Amani Hooker just signed a big contract extension, and I dare say that Cooper DeJean has a chance to be better than both of them. And they did that because they adapted to the scenarios, and then they also coach within their scheme. They blitz more than they used to because they didn't blitz much 10 years ago. And they make sure that they have the right guys covering receivers down the field, which we know cost them games against Iowa State previously and Ohio State in 2010. So I think the offense needs to learn from the defense, and it's just too stubborn and rigid to do that. And I think yesterday confirmed it.
Yes, I think, and we could talk. I think, obviously, there's not much Iowa can do from an offensive line standpoint at this point of the season until after the season, similar with wide receiver. But I think it's fair. And I don't think there's a guy that I've covered here, my 26th season covering Iowa football, that I admire more or have more respect for than Spencer Petras. I mean, the guy just handles himself so well and wants to win and is doing everything he can. And again, I don't think he's being put in the best position to succeed for his skill set.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure he is the best fit, as we said, for what is happening in front of him on the offensive line, because he just is not mobile enough to deal with a pass rush that's pretty consistently coming his way. The running game isn't helping him at all. You wonder, as bad as things are, what are they, 131 in total offense, 120 something in scoring? And Jovan Johnson mentioned this on the Rapid Reaction podcast we have here on the Hawk Fanatic feed. I encourage people to listen to he and Jordan Canzeri. They give really good feedback after games about what they're seeing. And Jovan's like, listen, you don't have to bench Spencer. Mm-hmm. Just put some packages in there for Alex. Mm-hmm. Get him out there and just see if there's a spark. If there isn't, you just eliminate those and stick with Spencer. But there's ways to manipulate this that you can approach it where you're not just upsetting the apple cart and you have a 2014 situation with Beathard and Rudock. Padilla and Petras are good friends. Yeah. They could maybe, they want to win. If they see this as an avenue to winning, I'm sure they're going to be on board. Basically dismiss that the backups, and I don't know, maybe they look terrible in practice, Scott. Maybe they are pathetic in practice. But we've seen what's happening in games. Maybe they get in the game, and I think it's been said by other people, what do you have to lose at this point?
Well, yeah. Like yesterday, what was the downside of making a quarterback change? And Brian turned it around and said, well, what's the upside? The upside is something different and something better. And I think that's
and what is the down? There is no more downside. You're already down at the bottom.
Let's go through the list. They're 127th in scoring, the most important stat, right, as we know.
That's the one that Kirk hangs his hat on.
14.7 points per game. And really, you start removing 2 safeties and 2 touchdowns.
That's what I was going to say. That includes defensive scores.
They have 4 red zone touchdowns in 6 games. They have 7 offensive touchdowns in 6 games.
Total. They have what, 18 in the last 14 games?
Yes, 18 in the last 14. Spencer, since the 6-0 start, has 3 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. Are they all his fault? No, absolutely not. Was he was a victim of circumstances in a few places? Yes. I think, Purdue, you're just throwing the ball all over the place and stuff's going to happen. However, scoring, total offense, as you said, 131. Pass offense, 120. That's the high water mark. And that's only because some of the teams below them are option teams. Rushing, 127. Hey, Iowa, get off the bus running. You're, physical football, displace the opponent, all that stuff. And then third down and red zone are in the same ballpark. 126, 122 for third down and 126 for red zone. I mean, this is just an abomination of an offense. So the downside is there's no downside because you're already at rock bottom. You're gonna get shut out. Okay, well, that happens too. But they
we only scored 3 points at Illinois instead of 6.
Yeah, you don't get the field goal on your own. You get it just after that. And then you look at the defense. The downside for that, they're third in the country in scoring defense right now. They're first when it comes to yards per attempt in offense and passing. Their worst one right now is rush, and that's 27th. But the other team, that's all they have to do really is run against them. And yeah, they've got some work to do there. I think that's the case.
I agree, and they also face 2 really good running teams with 2 really good running backs.
And so they've got some work to do there, but you know what? They're going to have Wyatt Black back. I think he's on the verge of, he can really elevate that unit. But they're 9th in total defense. That's going to change a little bit when you play Ohio State and Purdue. But I don't see him dropping out of the top 20 at all this year, maybe even the top 15. So you're not holding up your end of the bargain. It's not complimentary football. It's completely uneven. And if it was flipped, it would be kind of like what happened a few times on Iowa basketball, which is, yeah, they have the leading scoring team in the Big Ten, but they have the worst defense in the Big Ten. Well, that's kind of where we're at right now in flip. It's just the one aspect is when you can score, it's at least more entertaining. And that's where fans are like, oh my God, I can't believe I got to watch Iowa.
I'll ask a rhetorical question. Would Phil Parker be employed if this was flipped? No, I don't think so either. And we can get into the weeds a little bit with that too, about the dynamic. And Brian addressed it on Wednesday. I mean, he talked about the pressure of wanting to win for his father. But I mean, you're a dad, I'm a dad. A lot of people out here listening are dads. Can you imagine firing your son from any job? I mean, what that would be like. And if you don't have to do it, would you do it? If nobody's making you do it, would you do it? That's kind of the dynamic that we're in right now. And really the only way that this gets fixed, and I wrote about this in my column and other people have too, is Kirk has to want to change, right, Scott? He has to want to fix this. It's up to him, whether it be letting Brian do more of what Brian wants to do or making a change at that spot and doing things differently. He needs to evolve.
Mm-hmm. It's Kirk. It starts at the top. And, like the remark the other night about, we won 10 games last year. That's kind of his defensive mechanism sometimes is, and I know sometimes he feels like he's not respected, and he's right. There should be more respect for what Iowa has done because I've seen a lot of people wanting him fired, and I'm like, this team won the division last year. It's in the last 5 years.
Look at the record since 2015. I mean, you can't, if you're going to pile on them for what you're seeing in the last year and a half, roughly offensively, you also have to acknowledge what they've been able to do in the win-loss column, because our record is what it says we are, right? So exactly. That's it.
They haven't won less than 8 games. Now this year looks that to be the case. None of those years, the last 4, they ended the year ranked. That's pretty damn good. They had the 8th best winning percentage over a 5-year period. That's among Power 5 teams. That's outstanding. I think what though he has to do is, do you want to be good, complacent, comfortable, or do you want to take that shot and be great? And the problem becomes when you look at Iowa is, can you move Brian to a different position, and will it positively impact the team? And I don't know. I mean, can you remove Brian's voice, or will he still be kind of the big voice in the room if he's like, let's say they decide, all right, we're going to make a change in offensive line coach and we're going to move him there. It's a step down, but he's still on staff. He's a really good offensive line coach. He's going to help us there. Can you do that with him? Is he capable of taking that demotion, if you will, and becoming a less of a voice in the room, or would it just rub everybody the wrong way? That I don't know. I think that's really the dynamic that I think, because the best thing for this program is if Brian Ferentz is the offensive line coach, because he's really good at that, and maybe even run game coordinator. And if you want to do it that way, and then have, say, John Budmeyer be your quarterbacks coach and pass game coordinator, maybe play calling responsibility, and try to work your way through this issue, I think you're capable of it. But can Brian be a background voice and not the front voice? I don't know that. I mean,
and can Kirk allow what he allowed on defense, which is modernization of the defense to match up with what offenses were doing to them? Can you do some things differently from an offensive philosophy standpoint that allows you to move forward, instead of continuing to just say, listen, we need to execute better, when the things you're trying to execute are really hard in this day and age of football, and your margin for error is really thin. So to me, no matter what changes they make from an offensive standpoint, again, it starts with, can Kirk allow some things that maybe are out of his comfort zone?
Mm-hmm. The best thing for Iowa football is a complete new voice and system on offense. And it could be within a foundation of what Kirk wants to do. Hey, I still believe in the zone blocking scheme. I want to coach it. I want to teach it that way. I think that's a foundational. Okay. No worries there.
A lot of good zone blocking offenses around the country, both pro and college.
Exactly. San Francisco, Los Angeles Rams, they're outstanding in that. And it's a staple for a lot of programs. No problem. You want to do that. We want to be a ground acquisition run offense. Okay. Now, how do you expand that and to include things? Because Kirk has used phrases like gimmick offense. Brian used backyard football. You know what's called? Football. That's what it is.
It's called allowing your players to make plays.
Yes. They don't have to be run first, but they have to be run sometimes. And you just allow your players to make plays. It's like basketball. Let your best players make plays. And for a long time, even when they've had players like Noah Fant and Brandon Smith and Amir Smith-Marset to an extent, they haven't necessarily allowed their best players to make plays when they could. And, it's like, hey, just throw it up to them. Just see what can happen. I mean, they're 50-50 ball. Brandon Smith's going to win that. Let Noah Fant run to the ball and see what happens. And unfortunately, he dropped a lot of them, but keep doing it. This it's unfortunate that this offense is just so rigid that they're just not allowing that to mature.
All right, we're going to take a little break here. I want to let folks know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. Great organization there. We thank them for their support. Take a little break here and hear from some more of our sponsors, and we'll be back on the other side to finish up our discussion. All right, Scott. We were talking a little bit about this before we started recording. kind of, looking at the first half and then kind of giving our thoughts on what is going to happen in the second half of the season. I think anybody that is objective sees that winning the next game, the odds of that are astronomical. You're going into the number 2 team in the country. Yes, Iowa beat Ohio State in 2017. You just look at the dynamics of this game, Scott, and we'll break it down more next week. But just from a 30,000 foot view of this, you have a team that has one of the best offenses in the country, and we just spent 45 minutes talking about Iowa's deficiencies on that side of the ball. I just don't think Iowa can score enough points to win this game, and so that puts you at 3-4, and then you've got 5 games left.
Right. Yeah. There's just no use in even entertaining the discussion that this team has even a chance there. It would be as big of an upset as 55-24 was in 2017, or frankly, the year before when they played Michigan at home. The difference is Michigan plays, here's the dynamic. Ohio State leads the country in points per game, 48.8. Iowa's 127 at 14.7. So 48-14, that sounds like a logical score if Iowa can get to 14. And it's not because of the defense. It's just after a while, the defense is going to get worn down.
And we even saw, you kind of wonder, okay, in a game where Iowa's defense really helps, gets 3 turnovers, as it did on Saturday against Illinois, and the offense still couldn't take advantage of that, as you talked about earlier. So best case scenario, you go into Ohio State and get 3 turnovers. Can you count on the offense to cash in on them?
No. Maybe you're hoping that all of them are in the red zone, the opponent red zone, and you hope that you get a touchdown and 2 field goals. That's really where you are. And I'm not even being flippant. It's the truth. I mean, look at what's happened all season long. So I think what you do is, we could just look past this game and say, all right, now the remaining teams on the schedule, this is where losing a game like Illinois or Iowa State at the goal line is going to really make it tough to project that they can go 3-2 over the last 5 to even get to a bowl game. And Northwestern, yes, they should be favored at home, but this is not a good Iowa offense. And Northwestern, is not a good team at all, but they're capable of slowing down Iowa. Iowa's capable of slowing down Iowa. So it could very easily be a field goal game in the 4th quarter, one way or the other, in one of the worst games we'll see in years and decades. Purdue, I'm not going to project anything with Purdue because, again, I've seen this offense work against Iowa before, and the Purdue's offense, and I've seen Iowa's offense not be able to do anything. And so I think that's a loss, especially on the road.
Yeah, Purdue's defense is a little better this year than it's been.
Yeah, right. I mean, held Minnesota to 10 points. It had a gift interception in the end zone, but that's still, it counts. I think they're the best team in the West, and their schedule proves it. They've already played Penn State, so they played Maryland and they won. Their other one is Indiana, as it is every year. So I think Purdue is the team to beat in the West. So then you got to get 2 out of your final 3, all against your trophy rivals. I don't know. Maybe Wisconsin played horrifically one week against Illinois, and then played back to Wisconsin standards the next week against Northwestern. And I think coming to Kinnick Stadium, you gotta flex your rivalry muscles in that one. Minnesota on the road, I think be prepared to lose Floyd, and then Nebraska at home. They could very easily be 5-6 playing Nebraska to go to a bowl game, and Nebraska could be in the same boat. So they can actually have something at stake for one another, which has never really happened before. That both of them could be 5-6, and the winner gets to go to a bowl game. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, and really, I mean, the overlook of the rest of these games, again, beyond Ohio State, is can Iowa score enough to win these games? Because of those 5 teams, I would say maybe Northwestern has a comparably bad offense.
Mhm.
Those other teams all have the ability to score, in the 20s, which Iowa just doesn't right now.
Mhm.
So how good, and you also wonder, Scott, and we've seen this now. We're in week 6, and thankfully the defense gets a chance to recharge its batteries a little bit during this bye week. But the cumulative effect of having an offense that's struggling much as Iowa is the pressure and the wearing down of your defense. So just because Iowa's defense was really good against, Iowa State and pretty good against Michigan, you can't just say it's going to be that good when we get to the beginning or middle of November, just because of, the position it's been put in.
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly. Yeah. The cumulative effect. Unfortunately, somebody may go down and get injured, get worn down. I mean, when you look at the next 3 opponents are not necessarily grinding opponents. Right. So that may be a little bit helpful, but the last 3, well, certainly Wisconsin and Minnesota are. And so you're going to get a physical toll of a game against those 2 teams. And then in Nebraska, it's on a short week anyway. You don't know what you're going to get with Nebraska. You don't know what you're going to get with Iowa, frankly. Well, or maybe you do, and that's the scary part. And the sad part about this all is that this defense is capable of keeping this team, even a bad offense, in the game. Even against Ohio State, if they had an offense capable of scoring points.
This team is 3-3 with 7 offensive touchdowns.
I know.
And that's amazing.
It's gross. I went back and looked since some of the stuff here, since they have 18 offensive touchdowns in the last 14 games.
Yeah, they're 7-7, right? During those 14.
Right. They have 5 passing touchdowns, and they have 5 touchdowns via either defense or special teams.
Yeah.
They have as many touchdowns on defense and special teams as they do passing over the last 14 games. They have 13 rushing touchdowns, but again, does the Nevada only twice they had 2 rushing touchdowns in the same game. That was Northwestern last year, which Alex Padilla was a quarterback for, and Caleb Johnson's big runs in that disaster of an evening, against Nevada. So, yeah, it's a shame because this defense deserves better. This defense is one that could go to Indianapolis and keep you in a game.
Yeah, no doubt. And just an offense that's not hurting you, that can just be average, changes the complexion of this team a great deal. And I wonder, not to harp and go back on the quarterback situation, Scott, but I think a lot of what the discussion of what came out of yesterday, and we touched on Brian's comment about what the upside is. I thought one of Kirk Ferentz's low points as a coach was what he said about Deuce Hogan after Nebraska last year. Yeah. And that led to the kid leaving, and we can debate whether that's a big deal or not, based on, if the kid was a fit here or if he was going to develop into, what they needed at quarterback. But I just felt like I'm not even going to say it was intentional slight by Brian. I think he got caught up in the moment of wanting to show that his decision and his dad's decision were what mattered. And that in turn was a shot at Padilla, who came back here and gave you depth where he could have left last year. And he'll graduate in December and he'll have a decision to make. I thought the comments on Joey Labus were kind of backhanded compliment, maybe I would say. I just wonder kind of what they're so careful about what they say publicly about most of their coaches and players. It just seems the last 2 years, Kirk's comments on Deuce and then what Brian said yesterday, it almost seems like they're not as protective of their quarterbacks publicly.
Yeah, especially their backups.
Yeah.
You know, their starter, they'll go to the mat in every single episode, you know, whether it's Nate or
Yeah.
CJ or Spencer more than ever. But yeah, I mean, what he said about Deuce last year, and I got it to some extent, that and the way he phrased it, and he's like, he should have phrased it differently, and he could have corrected himself immediately. Instead, he's like, hey, I screwed up. I should have said that. And I think he realized it after the fact. But Deuce has a chance to play this week for Kentucky if Will Levis isn't there. Saying that about Alex, and what Brian said after his flip it remark was fine. What's the downside?
And what he said to you before that about the evaluation, I thought was fine.
Yeah.
When you first asked about how, why Spencer was staying in there, I thought he gave a good answer for that.
Right. And then, but, just to kind of, this was a watch yourself press conference because of the fan base. And given that kind of a remark, a flippant kind of sarcastic remark is not going to do any favors to him or to the team. So I mean, Alex has done a lot. He's not been angry publicly. He has every right to. He won every start last year.
He's also, I mean, we talk about Spencer. Alex is an incredibly nice, thoughtful person.
Right. That Illinois game, he was 6 of 18, but he had 6 drop passes.
Yeah.
That's not on him. That was on receivers. And it makes his whole percentage look really bad. And he did what he could do for the team. And I don't know. And really, what they're gonna I don't know. What do you think is gonna happen, Rob? I mean, my guess is Spencer will go try his NFL wares, and he should after this year. I expect Alex Padilla to probably transfer after this year. I don't know about the 2 younger ones, but I don't know that if you're Joey Labus, I think you want to know, okay, am I in your plans or not? Because I expect to be competing for the starting job. And if you don't think I'm good enough, I'm leaving. And, my guess then would be they would have to hit the portal at that point, whether they're comfortable with it or not. I mean, I thought going into last year, they could have grabbed somebody like Keaton Slovis from USC. And I thought, he's kind of a pro style guy. He went to Pitt, and then of course, Jordan Addison was basically a trade, but
I think USC won that trade.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But, that just,
I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. I think if you're Alex, you have to wonder how much you're valued. He went through spring, kind of saw where things stood, loaded up his schedule for the fall to make sure he graduates in December. So he has options. Smart of him. I give him credit for that. I do not blame him at all for the approach that he's had. But I think if you're any quarterback on the roster, and I agree with you, I think Spencer moves on. You say, listen, where do I stand? Are you going, even if you're Alex, Joe, Carson May, and even Marco Linnaeus that's, hasn't signed yet, but is expected to be in this 23 class. Where do we stand here? Are you going into the transfer portal after this season? And if you are, you need to be honest with these guys. If you're going to do that. If you think, okay, we've had this is 2 years of evaluating Labus, 4 years of evaluating Padilla, a year evaluating Carson May. If you don't think, if none of those 3 are the guys you think can lead your football team next year, you have to let them know if you're going into the portal and looking for something out. Do not, because it almost feels like I have no way of knowing this, Scott, but was Alex Padilla, he was told he was going to get a chance to compete for this job last year in December, January. Was he given the opportunity to compete for this job and just didn't get it done? or that's what is hard to know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, was it always going to be shaded towards Spencer? Or did they say, you know what, we're going to look at this, and the only thing we've got is Spencer's going to start with the ones, but we're taking a clean slate look at everybody here. And it just looked like to me that, and maybe Spencer was better because, and really in the practices, he seemed to be for the most part better. But yeah, if you're Alex Padilla, yeah, load up, graduate, and then figure it out from there. And I don't know that I would trust the Iowa staff anyway if they said, okay, you're our incoming starter. And because they said they have a lot of confidence in you, but when your offense has played this poorly, and especially in the first 2 games at the quarterback position, I don't know that I could trust them to say, yeah, they're I mean, either that or they think I'm so bad that I can't even take a snap, one single snap. So I would definitely, and of course he's not me and I'm not him and I'm not there. So I don't know what all that's been discussed. I mean, but I do think that I would probably look for a master's degree at another program.
Yeah, and I think there would be a market out there for Alex. I think there are teams looking for quarterbacks. We've seen some of them this year. I mean, he could play at Nevada without any problem.
Right.
And the list goes on. I mean, he will get some where he's got film from last year. He's won games at the Big Ten level. He certainly would get there's certainly a market out there for him. For Labus, different situation for him. He's got more eligibility. He's got a tougher decision, I think, just in terms of where do I stand? Are you going to bring a quarterback in with multiple years of eligibility out of the portal? And what does that mean for me? It's just a really muddled situation, I think, not only this season, but moving forward.
Right, for sure. And I think what Labus has to decide also is how does this skill set really mold with Iowa?
Yeah, that's a good
point. He was recruited and committed during the COVID. So he really didn't get a chance to work out at Iowa and all that.
No, he visited here without being able to meet the coaches.
Exactly. So you have that. And so I think, he was well received on the scout team. And then I've heard some people say, he's a lot like Drew Tate, or he's got a little Drew Tate to him, and other people.
Good.
Yeah, I know. There was, he's like, hey, one person did tell me, he's like, well, does a lot of stuff off schedule, but doesn't really do much with the Iowa offense, or hasn't learned the Iowa offense. I'm like,
good,
you guys need to do something different. Yeah. And what's the damn problem here? But so I don't know. And then Carson May, I really don't know anything. I haven't heard. I know he's been on scout team. That's it.
Yeah, he didn't. I don't think he's traveled this year, and I think there was a home game that he didn't dress.
He did once. He went to Rutgers.
Did he go to Rutgers? Okay, because he wasn't at Illinois.
Yeah, he was at Rutgers. So they brought all 4. Excuse me. So yeah, I think he's probably. And so I don't know where he stands or what he thinks he stands. If they like him or they don't like him, they probably haven't even looked at him, frankly, because it's probably more the defensive staff looking at him now than the offensive staff. So that's probably more of a bowl prep type of situation if they get one. I don't know if they even get one at this point.
Yeah, we talked about that before. I think there's no doubt in my mind that this program benefits from a bowl game, just from all the things we've talked about for the last hour. Development that's needed. Those are bowl practices that you can use to develop and evaluate and all that stuff. And the coaches need to make better decisions this bowl prep than they did last bowl prep, because I feel like the evaluation and the preparation for this season wasn't up to par to put the players in the best position based on what they saw during the offseason. And Kirk felt like, and he said during the offseason that he felt this offensive line was going to be better than last year's offensive line. So to me, that evaluation is what? Yeah. So no doubt that bowl prep is important here. But I also said, as we talked about before we started recording, that's another month of people being pissed.
Yeah.
But
I
you
think,
can't worry about that, obviously.
right.
But that's just going to be a month of the happy holidays. The holiday season will be more people bitching.
Yeah. Well, and but I'll say this, if they do get to go to a bowl game, they're going to have to beat a couple of their rivals. They're going to have to beat probably Nebraska for sure, either Wisconsin or Minnesota.
Let's do this, Scott. Let's rank the difficulty of opponents left on the schedule. Ohio State, obviously, number one.
We'll just leave that out.
Okay, so we've got 5 other opponents here: Northwestern, Purdue, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska. I don't have them in order, but those are the 5.
Yeah. We want to go most difficult, or
yeah, let's go. No, let's go easiest. What of those teams do you think Iowa has the best chance to win?
I would say Northwestern.
Agreed.
They've won one game. That was the first game. They trailed in that game twice by 11 points.
Onside kick.
Yeah. Yeah. They got frosted.
Yes, I think you got Ohio State on one end of the spectrum and Northwestern on the other. However, I think Iowa has a better chance to lose to Northwestern than it does to win at Ohio State.
No, yeah, for sure. No question. We've seen that one time and time again.
Oh, I think Fitz is probably already preparing for this one.
Yeah, exactly. He's probably like, hey, we're not going anywhere, and neither are they. And
if we can put a nail in that coffin and help, we'll help.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, we had a shit season, but we beat Iowa and Nebraska. We'll take, we'll move on with that. No, I think that's something that I think Iowa needs to be prepared for too. That you can't just walk into, oh, okay, well, at least we got them. They've seen that. We've seen that over and over. They've beaten Iowa the last 3 times in Kinnick, but that's one. So second easiest. Now this is where it gets challenging. I would say Nebraska, even though I think the matchup might be a little bit more difficult for the defense. But watching them play Rutgers, they won by a point at Rutgers
with 2 defensive touchdowns.
Yeah, no, I meant Nebraska. 14.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You talked about Iowa winning at Rutgers.
Yeah, Iowa won 27-10. They won 14-13, and they were down 13-0 at halftime, and they were really sloppy. They came back to win. But I think by then they're going to be in a meatball situation as well, because then they've got to go from Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa to finish out their season under an interim coach. I think this is probably the high mark of their year, of their season right now, where they're at. I think, they're off this week, but
the one thing that
no, they're not.
You don't know what they're going to be like when we get to Black Friday. Yeah. But again, just like with Fitz, Nebraska's, especially if Iowa's 5-6 going into that game, Nebraska is going to be try to be the spoiler,
right? And Iowa's ruined them, I think, twice. They had 5 wins, and Iowa's knocked them out of the bowl, in the last game. But no, Nebraska plays this week at Purdue.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I don't see that one. And then they also, and then you throw on the front part of that last four is they play Illinois, and Illinois is a physical team, if nothing else. So that could be a rough month there for them to finish out on. So I would probably put them 2. What about you?
Yes, I would put them 2, and I'm going to put Wisconsin the next after. No, but to differentiate between Wisconsin and Nebraska, I think, as you said, I think Nebraska's offense is a tougher matchup for Iowa's defense than Wisconsin's is. So that's the rub for me. If Nebraska is able to put up some points, can Iowa's offense match that? Whereas I think that that Wisconsin game is going to look like the Illinois game. It's going to be just a slog.
Mm-hmm. Oh, exactly. Braylon Allen's a good running back. Graham Mertz is not, he's up and down. He's very inconsistent. He has some good games. He had a decent game against Northwestern.
And their offensive line isn't as good as it's been.
Yeah. So I would expect it at Kinnick to be back and forth, like Iowa State, like Illinois.
Yep.
And it's going to be about, can they win a game? And at some point, you know, special teams comes into play and all the other things. So I would put that third. I think that's probably your best path. The fourth easiest or second hardest, I guess I would go with Minnesota, because they are kind of, again, built for you. I do think, though, that they have they have a better offense than Wisconsin, more consistent offense, than Illinois. They have a running back that is, I think he's the best one they're going to face, and Mo Ibrahim. Last year they punished Iowa, and Iowa pulled out a win, and only because they had Alex Padilla starting. I don't know if they win if they have a different quarterback. And you want to talk about a team that wants Iowa and wants Iowa's ass. It's Minnesota. I mean, even if they could possess Floyd and the Axe for a week together, it'd be the first time since I think '89 that they've been able to do that.
Yeah, and the good thing is Fleck won't play that up at all if they have both trophies. His ass will be rowing upstream, downstream, everywhere you can row. It'll be Fleck in the boat.
He'll be in a canoe with Floyd and the Axe out on the Mississippi, rowing by the Viking Stadium.
Yeah, but I'm with you. I think Purdue is, after Ohio State, Purdue is the toughest matchup for Iowa. It's on the road, very explosive offense. They've already shown they've got Iowa's number, and they're a better team this year.
Yeah. Defensively, they can play, which they really – I mean, they've shown they can play against Iowa, but again, that's Iowa's offense.
And they've run the ball halfway decent this year. They're a good team.
I expect to see them in Indy, and maybe they lose once the rest of the way. And I'm not saying Iowa's going to be that once, but
they beat Minnesota, right? Do they have
this week?
They still have Wisconsin, right?
They got to go to Wisconsin the same day Iowa goes to Ohio State.
Okay,
that's going to be their biggest test because they've lost 15 straight to Wisconsin. So,
and that's a huge game for Wisconsin. That could be a get-right game for Wisconsin in terms of trying to recover.
Yeah, I mean that could put them in that position of, all right, they still got a chance to get somewhere and everything. So, if I was to say percentages on winning, I would say 80% against Northwestern, 55% against Nebraska, 50-50 against Wisconsin.
That's fair.
40% against Minnesota and 20% against Purdue. I just
Ohio State.
2 something. It would have to be a miracle. I mean,
somebody asked me this, and I'm wondering how you feel about this, Scott. Can Iowa get a moral victory at Ohio State?
That's a great question. I think for the fans they can, and I think for the offense they can. I don't think they can for the team necessarily. I mean, what if they lose like they did in 13 when last time we went there, 34-24?
Yeah, the tight end game.
Yeah, that's the type of game that they're going to have, but they don't have Brandon Sheriff. Who might have had the best game by an offensive lineman I've ever seen. They had Fedorowicz, they had Jake Doozy, who was fantastic. Kittle was out there. He was like the fourth tight end.
Yep.
Henry Krieger Coble was blocking. There's another one in there. Oh, Sugar Ray Hamilton, So, and they were able to really dominate at point of attack and go in 13 personnel, 3 tight ends. And maybe they have to do that again. Sam Laporta's in that category too. And I think Luke Lachey has the potential to get in that category. But does the rest of the offensive line have that ability to blow them off the ball? Well, you got to try something. Maybe that's their best punch.
Yeah, if there's a game where you just say, listen, let's let it all hang out. Let's do some, let's be as crazy as we can be and throw caution to the wind. Because if you lose 42-7, people expect you to lose 42-7. But if you take some chances, maybe you may. maybe you put the pressure on the number 2 team in the country, get it into the second half, and maybe your defense does come up with some plays, and then you go from there. But if I was just going to come out and be as vanilla as it's been, and it's going to get killed.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And the defense is capable of coming up with big plays, with interceptions, 3 and outs on occasion, stopping the run. Their receivers are the best Iowa's ever faced.
Incredible.
And that's and Smith and Jigba isn't even there right now. I mean, he's been hurt all year, but
he'll be back for Iowa.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, Ekwa and Marvin Harrison.
Yeah.
Harrison's. I mean, he has 3 free touchdown games.
Yeah.
That's just unreal.
And for folks that don't know, Ohio State's also on a bye this week.
Yeah, right. So they're getting rested, and Stroud threw a pick 6 the other day, but he also threw 6 touchdown passes. Now, Michigan State's defense is not Iowa's defense at all. No. It's not close. So I wouldn't expect them to throw 6 TDs against Iowa. But, if they slow them down, let's say you get to the mid-second quarter and you've only given up 10 points, I feel like you've got a chance to kind of, all right, let's just keep grinding at them. They haven't been in a game like this against a defense like this since maybe the opener against Notre Dame. Just keep pushing, and then Iowa's offense is going to have to do something, whether it's running the ball or not, so I don't know. I'm just trying to talk myself into some scenario that maybe it doesn't.
The last spread I saw in that was like 21 or 22. I got to imagine that's going to go up.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be in the 28 range.
Yeah.
4 touchdowns. And it's just, you just feel so helpless because your offense doesn't give you a chance. It was the other way around and you had no defense. Then you could say, well, maybe they just step all over themselves a few times on offense and then you can do something. But in this situation, you just don't feel like, okay, you forced a fumble at the Ohio State 36. Here's your chance. Do you feel confident that they could punch in a touchdown from that distance? No. You're just hoping that they get 1 first down so they could maybe kick a field goal. But let's face it, Drew Stevens going to the horseshoe, 105,000 people there, kicking a field goal from 43 yards. I don't know. That's a lot of pressure for a young kid.
What was his miss at Illinois? 45?
Yeah, 45. And it was on the left hash mark, and he kicked it left of the goalpost. I mean,
yeah,
stuff happens. I'm not blaming him for the loss.
No, he's not going to make every field goal. I guess as we were talking about with the Ohio State spread, let's hop into our picks for the week before we get out of here. Scott is the key master when it comes to the keeping track of what we're doing here. Like I told him before we started recording, we've got 3 different pick prognostication contests, I guess, that I'm in. I guess you can call them contests. Bet Rivers, the Hawk Fanatic, and the one we do here on the pod. So.
Yeah. Well, last week was your best week. You got me. We were 4-2. You were 4-2, and I was 2-4. So you're
the
catching up.
Sun even shines on a dog's ass some days. That's what they say.
Yeah, you're 29-30-1. I'm 36-23-1. My worst week by far. And the only two that we were different, you won both, and by the slimmest of margins. But that's what makes betting so interesting. I had Nebraska. You had Rutgers. Nebraska was -3. They won by a point. The other one was Ohio State minus 27.5 on the road at Michigan State. They won by 29, and you had Ohio State and I had Michigan State. So this week has 5 games. They should be pretty fascinating here. Let's start with the first one, which really has a big impact in our part of the world. Minnesota minus 6.5 at Illinois.
Yeah, I did see this line. So I somewhat lied about not seeing any of the lines before we did this, but that one's like they're begging you to take Illinois.
Yeah, right.
And that makes me worried to take Illinois. Can Minnesota win by a touchdown in Illinois? I'm just going to go with what my eyes have told me, Scott. I think this is probably a field goal game,
Okay.
one way or the other. I'm going to take Illinois with 6.5 at home. I think
Okay.
that's just a lot of points for, and again, Illinois is coming off 2 huge division wins at Wisconsin against Iowa, but maybe that gives them the confidence to be able to at least stay there with Minnesota.
Yeah. Well, these are, I think, number 1 and number 2 in scoring defense in the country. Iowa was number 3, which I think tells you a lot about the competition that all of them have played, as opposed to the prowess of their defense necessarily. The 6.5 on the road is an interesting number. There's part of me that wonders, okay, will Illinois just get too high after beating Wisconsin and Iowa, and then they fall flat? Especially
What's
if
the quarterback situation there? Do you know? Is DeVito out?
he's not been ruled out yet.
Okay.
But I don't know. I'm going to go with Minnesota, because even though I think that it's the 6.5 is a tough number to move around, I like the fact Ibrahim will be back. They have a week off. They had a week off last week. I think they're the better team. And even though Illinois is, every opponent in the Big Ten has that other opponent that kind of is a pain in their butt, and Illinois is that for Minnesota. But I think PJ will enjoy beating Bielema. So, by 10 or more. So I'm going to give the 6.5. So
2 introverts there, PJ and Brett.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Wisconsin -7 at Michigan State.
Man, Michigan State's bad. That's a lot of points at home, though. Again, I'm going to go the other way with this one, though. I think Wisconsin's maybe figuring some things out a little bit. Maybe I'm overinflating the win at crappy Northwestern, but I think Michigan State is just bad. And I think Wisconsin may be okay. So I'll go with okay throwing the touchdown.
I'm there with you. I'm going to go with okay and throwing the touchdown as well. I mean, when you look back even the last couple of weeks, Michigan State lost at, was a 8-point underdog at Maryland and lost against the spread. Last week they were 27.5-point home favorite or home underdog to Ohio State, lost the spread. This week, 7-point home underdog to Wisconsin, which only lost by 24 points to Illinois a couple weeks ago. I still
that
think
game was a little fluky, though. That Illinois game with Wisconsin.
Right.
Wisconsin wasn't as bad as that final score. Mertz was bad.
Yeah. Mertz was terrible. And it was fairly even. They had a lot of bad things happen to it. And that's what I thought with Illinois, that I'm like, yeah, they did a nice job of shutting down the run, but I thought Wisconsin hurt themselves more. Yep. And then defensively was where I had the most concerns about them, because I thought, yeah, they didn't do very well. And that was a Jim Leonard situation, but having all these external factors or some other stuff. They had a kid kicked off the team today, 5-star. So that's weird. Logan Brown.
Yeah, his tweet made it seem like it was his choice.
Yeah, right. Sounded like Jim Leonard said, no, he's off. He had an issue.
So, they were playing, I heard they were playing him like in a jumbo tight end last week. He was like that 6th offensive lineman that they do on occasion.
Yeah.
He lost his starting job. They brought him in for that, and he had enough and voiced his opinion, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, not good when you have somebody that highly decorated at Wisconsin and they don't pan out. So Iowa knows that too well too. Next one, Maryland -11.5 at Indiana. I'm going to go with the Hoosiers just on the points. I think they lose the game. That's a lot of points at home to lose. And they played pretty hard against Michigan last week. Yeah. So 11.5 is a lot. So I'm going to take the Hoosiers, but I still think Indiana wins out. If I were going outright, I could pick Maryland, but I think Indiana plus 11.5.
Man, Indiana is one of those teams that I have no feel for. They beat Illinois, played hard against Michigan, looked like crap at Nebraska. Just very up and down team. and I thought Maryland kind of wasted an opportunity against Purdue. I'm with you. I'll go with Indiana here just because of the points. I think Maryland wins this game by maybe a touchdown.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it could be 30-20, even 31-20.
Yeah.
31-21, something like that I can see. And that's just a lot of points. For Maryland that lost a really close game at home last week to Purdue. So Nebraska at Purdue -14. I'm going Purdue. I think this is when Nebraska kind of gets a taste of, they've gotten a little bit of juice because they beat Indiana at home, and then they went to Rutgers and won by a point. And they've played the three worst teams in the league if you throw Northwestern in there. And I think going to Purdue, they'll find out really quick how far away they are from winning the West, like they somewhat are talking about.
I'm with you. I think Purdue builds off of, I think, a really solid road win last week against a decent team. And I'm not buying Nebraska's little run here. It's been against bad teams. So yeah, I'm with you. I'll throw the 2 touchdowns. I think there's a lot of points in this game. I don't know what the total is, but I would probably take the over in this game.
Yeah, if I don't know what the total is, but if I was thinking like 52-28, that would be one that I'd turn down.
I think Charlie Jones has a bounce back week.
Yeah, I'm sure there's still, he wouldn't mind doing something against Nebraska, for all time's sake. The game of the week nationally, in my eyes, other than maybe Alabama, Tennessee, is Penn State at Michigan. Michigan -7 at home. I'm going to go with Penn State. And I think Michigan may win the game. I see it more as a 3 to 7 point game, not a 7 to 10 type of game.
Yeah, can Penn State's defensive line match up with Michigan's offensive line? That's the key. If they can't, then Michigan covers. Penn State usually pretty. I'm going to take Michigan. I'm going to throw the 7. Penn State really hasn't beaten anybody yet. That they get credit for the win at Auburn, sure. I'm not sure Michigan's beaten anybody yet either, though. So this is really by far the best team either one of these teams has played. So that's the hardest part to evaluate this game. But I think Michigan's juiced up for this in the big house and ready to go. Just think is the more balanced team.
Yeah, I think Michigan wins, but I look at it as like a 24-20 type of game.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think they have a better offensive line, and I think it'll probably dictate some tempo. Penn State has the best defensive backfield, I think, in the Big Ten. So they'll create some problems for J.J. McCarthy that they'll have to live with. But when I look at, what Penn State's done, they won on the road at Purdue in the opener. I thought
that's true. That's a good win.
They were able to, take care of business a few times this year. Auburn, that's not an easy place to play, even though they're not real good, but the way they blew them out on the road in an SEC environment, I thought was impressive. Michigan, I think they're, I was impressed that the way they were efficient at Kinnick Stadium. They didn't allow the situation to dictate to them. They didn't allow the mystique of Iowa at home against top 5 teams, or Iowa's defense, or their takeaways, or what's happened. Well, they haven't won there since 17 years. Impact them at all. They just played a very consistent game. They dictated tempo on offense against Iowa's defense. It wasn't just Iowa's offense that was bad. It was the fact that their offense beat Iowa's defense. And then I thought last week was, they had some adversity they had to face at Indiana. Not a good team, but, they won 2 fairly tight games. Maryland, I think, is better than Iowa, and they won at home against them, but that was only by a touchdown. But I think this has got the potential to be an either-or game. And the winner of this game, if they lose to, I think if they lose to Ohio State, still has a decent chance of getting into the playoff. You know why? Because they don't have to play in Indianapolis against Ohio State. That's one thing that a lot of people have talked about with whether it's the divisional race, that that this is why you want no divisions. But I'd argue the opposite, which is this is why you want divisions, because the loser of the championship, you don't have to throw your number 2 team in that realm, kind of the way the SEC West has performed over the years. So I think,
and say Purdue wins the West this year and Penn State beats Michigan, that you have that on your resume. We beat the team that won the other division.
right.
We lost to the best team in the league, but we're clearly the number 2 team in this league.
Exactly. So if they lose by, they're actually hosting Ohio State the 29th, which will be a pretty fun game to watch. But if we can, it's Northwestern Iowa Day, so that's super important.
Homecoming.
Yeah, 2:00, 2:30 game.
Welcome back.
Yeah, it's the same day as Michigan State, which won't be much of a game, and Ohio State Penn State, which will be a game. But let's say that Penn State loses by a touchdown, a field goal at home to Ohio State. Ohio State runs the show and goes to Indy, wins decisively against Purdue. Then they could sit there at 11-1 and say, why should a 1-loss Clemson, why should a USC or Pac-12 champion be ahead of us? And it's the same argument that some SEC West teams have made over the years, like with Bama and LSU and teams like that have been so good. So I think that could end up helping the Big Ten as opposed to hurting it. And I am actually writing that story tomorrow and talking to Kevin Warren, that he said, because right now the divisional debate is not done at all. I thought it was close. It's not close. And part of that is the unintended consequences of losing big rivalry games, and also, what happens to just the situation we just described. I mean, the ultimate goal is to get as many teams in the playoff as possible.
Yep.
And if that means, hey, we got a better chance of our second team in the East getting there without playing a second game, then what's the point? So now you might say, if you're only going to get one team, you want to see the 2 best teams playing in Indianapolis. But I would say that the Big Ten has 2 or 3 quality teams, and we'll find out who's number 2 this weekend. I'm pretty excited to watch it.
Yeah, looking forward to it as well. It's that divisional, non-divisional debate is, it's different when you're talking about the Big 12, where you get everybody that gets to play everybody else. Then that makes sense to me. No divisions. Yeah. This one is a little bit harder. It's not black and white. There are pros and cons on both sides of the discussion. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, the most fascinating debate, you have some teams in the league who do not care about playing anybody every year. I mean, Penn State is on the record of saying that we don't have an opponent that we feel like we have to play every single year. Rutgers and Maryland feel the same way.
And James Franklin is the biggest proponent of not having divisions.
Absolutely. And part of that's because he hasn't had a chance to get that second game against, because there for a couple of years, they were the second best team in the league. I remember when they lost to Ohio State in 2017, but now Wisconsin was undefeated. Still, they didn't get a chance to get into the playoff, even though they would have been one of the better teams. So, but then you have the rivalry component. I mean, can you imagine Iowa and Minnesota not playing every year? Or, that would be really difficult. Or Iowa, Wisconsin. We've seen that before. That sucks. You want that. But again, some teams, Michigan is, I would dare say that there's going to be at least 2 protected games per team, because, you do have to respect the pecking order a little bit. You got Michigan with Ohio State. That game will be played. And Michigan State probably will be played. But beyond that, 2 or 3, do you want to fabricate some rivalries, or do you want to make sure that everybody's got a really good game? I think it's going to be really interesting to watch.
Protect Rutgers, Maryland, please.
Absolutely.
At all costs.
I cannot wait to see that join Iowa, Nebraska on Black Friday next year in prime time.
All right. What better way to end the show than a little levity on a very in a very tense time here in Hawkeye country. But it's all good, folks. Take a deep breath this weekend. Enjoy the games. Don't, kind of take a step back. That would be my advice. You don't have to, but maybe just kind of get outside, enjoy the fall weather, And then we'll see what happens the second half. You know, we always think we know what's going to happen. Weird stuff happens in sports. So let's see. We'll all be tuned in, whether or not you say you are or not. I'm done watching Iowa football. You'll watch, and so will we. And we'll be back to talk about it next Thursday on the Hotspot podcast. Thank you to all the sponsors. Thank you to the listeners. And we'll talk to you next week. Say goodbye, Scott.